Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. It is my pleasure today to welcome to join us to talk about regulatory reporting, Dario Crispini, who's the founder and chief executive officer of Kaizen Reporting. Dario is going to be talking to us today about reporting challenges into 2021. Before we move on to that, I would just like to congratulate Dario and his team. Kaizen Reporting won the Regulatory Reporting Solution of the Year Award for the FOW International Awards for 2020. So congratulations, Dario, and all the team at Kaizen for their success. So well done for that. So Dario, I'm sure you'll reflect on 2020 and sort of look into 2021 as we sort of go through the questions. But the first question I have for you is, as we look into 2021, what do you see as being the main sort of regulatory challenges that your clients and other firms, our listeners, need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so morning, Luke. Very nice to see you again. And yeah, thanks very much for the selecting us for the award. Everybody at Kaizen is very chuffed with that result. In terms of the reporting regulations, I mean, we've had such a strange year, as everybody knows. I think the industry as a whole has done amazingly well transitioning to remote working. And we were very lucky in the sense that the technology that had recently been adopted by firms was in that position. I mean, we'd be in a different economic situation had we not had those that technological level of maturity in across the industry. Regulators similarly have kept going, and surprisingly, I was quite surprised by the amount of new regulation and consultations that were coming out of ESMA. So very active year, despite the lockdown. We've obviously have to contend with Brexit, and that's on both sides of the coin, both European firms and UK firms. There will be some knock-on implications for both. The aim for the FCA has been to keep things as much as possible on the status quo, so that there's minimising change for firms. But this year we have had a lot of sort of relaxation of various obligations placed by regulators because of the circumstances. That's starting to slip away, actually. Just the other day, the FCA was stating that they now expect firms to record trader conversations. Obviously, trading's taking place away from the trading floor at the moment. With the lockdowns, and up to now it hasn't been mandated that there has to be telephone recording of those trades. That's now changing. They're starting to see the sort of length of the impact of COVID, and they're starting to think ahead in terms of what they want to see. During the year, reporting has remained really important for regulators, so it was one of the areas that they didn't relax the obligations on firms. So we've continued with both EMIR and transaction reporting and other types of reporting, but transaction reporting is important from a market abuse monitoring perspective. So that sinks in with its importance was much heightened really with the loss of telephone recording on the trading floor and the loss of oversight of the traders themselves. So we have seen transaction reporting being more important. On the EMIR side, again, concentrations of risk within particular firms, etc. It's important to be able to monitor for that, and that's what EMIR enables the regulators to do. So I think going forward, we'll see some bedding in of the Brexit changes. I don't think they've been too drastic. There are some changes that, I'm referring to reporting here, there are some changes that firms will need to make in regard to various areas. Venues will see a big change because they're going to be having a lot more third country members trading on their platforms, both in the EU and the UK, since all the UK firms are now third country for EU and vice versa. So a lot more direct reporting by venues will be carried out, which will be a challenge for them. And to be fair, that's a very difficult ask in terms of regulations, because they're having to construct reports for each of their individual members. And the way those members trade may be slightly different, and their arrangements may be different. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Just in getting into the detail, I think that trade reporting has been a bit of a problem area. So this is the sort of post-trade transparency obligations. I think we're fairly well sorted in terms of venue trading. So in the UK, the FCA will recognise any trade publications made on EU venues, but that reciprocal arrangement, I think, has been agreed for UK venues. But when UK firms publish to a UK APA, that's not recognised as being equivalent. And so a European publication is also needed. And that's going to cause a lot of headaches and complexities, because firms now need to know whether where the counterparty is a UK firm. If they're a European firm, they're going to the reporting obligation is going to fall onto them, so they need to deal with that. Then on transaction reporting, it's mostly the status quo, but there's a few changes around the short selling flag, which has been a problem area for firms since MiFID go live. So hopefully the changes that have been implemented by firms will have come through properly. Okay. So that kind of, I do think throughout the year we're going to see some new regulations coming through, but I do think firms need some time to pause, and bringing in new regulations like we saw SFTR go live during COVID. I mean, that's a huge achievement for the industry, but under those conditions, it's very difficult to achieve, especially when you're building new things. You need people in the same room to be able to discuss and share ideas as to how to deal with these regulatory changes.
Okay. Just, you mentioned Brexit, Dario. When we think about your clients and the other firms out there that are affected by Brexit, what should firms already have in place? What should they have already done now that the UK has left the EU? Well,
firms will have already implemented changes to their reporting processes to accommodate the change in the reporting obligations. I think the key step for them now is to ensure that they've conducted appropriate levels of review or assurance to make sure that they're reporting as they should be. And the sooner they do that, the better. The regulators, both in the EU and the UK, expect firms to remediate any issues that there may be in their reporting. So the sooner you fix or identify the issues and then fix them, the cleanup exercise is so much smaller and more manageable. And that sort of remediation obligation is a huge cost and distraction for firms. I mean, there's a lot of consequential costs as a result of the need to fix historic reporting. We've recently, we've been developing over the past 12 months a re-reporting capability to support our clients. But, the whole process is very complicated. There's so much variability in the reports. It's a complicated process, and so we're still building that out. But the costs of remediation should not be underestimated. And so the sooner that firms identify issues, those costs can be better managed. So I'd certainly recommend that review is taken out, is conducted as soon as practicable.
So as a former regulator yourself, Dario, what is your sense of what regulators will be expecting in 2021 and beyond in terms of reporting?
Yeah, so we've got EMIR and MiFID. I would say they're both now mature reporting regimes. So there's been 3 years to bed down MiFID, which is the more recent, and regulators have been quite relaxed. We haven't seen any significant fines issued or anything like that, but I think the expectation of regulators will be that now the industry is getting this right. However, that's not what we quite see for new clients coming onto us. The quality of reporting is quite patchy, and I think firms would be sensible to make sure that they have those controls in place, which are mandated under MiFID anyway, in terms of accuracy testing and performing their reconciliations to ensure the quality of their data. Testing is very difficult. The requirements are complex, and the more complex the firm in terms of the variety of instruments they trade and different trading mechanisms they use, the more likely there'll be issues with the reports. So it is essential that they conduct ongoing accuracy testing. And my expectation is that the quality of reporting has been improving since go live, but not at the rate that regulators would anticipate or be happy with. I obviously can't speak for them, but when I was running the market surveillance at the FSA, when you get data issues with the reports, that will throw off any technology that you've put in place to identify and investigate suspicious trading activity. And so the poor data will cause more disruptions in that process, and basically it removes the ability of the regulator to start leveraging the transaction reports at scale for analysis to help surveil the markets. So I think after 3 years, the expectation of the regulators will now be that the data should be of a suitable quality that they can rely on and use. But if you've got a 5% error rate, which frankly it's way above that, if you've got a 5% error rate, that will have a disproportionate reflection in any algorithms that you're running on the data to identify market abuse. So your false positives and the kind of dead ends that you'll run into when you're analysing the data will be much higher than that 5%. So I think there will be a push for better quality data, and that's been constant. The ESMA has had a data quality mandate in place for a long time now, and I'm not convinced that we are seeing those steps being made in terms of the level of quality. And regtech, like ourselves and others, certainly helps in that process, but there is some way to go in terms of the rate at which firms are leveraging that.
Okay. And Dario, what are the main reporting issues that you think firms need to be thinking about right now?
I think SFTR, we went live, some of the firms went live with SFTR last year. And SFTR is extremely complex, and there is a lot of risk around that in terms of reporting risk, because it's a new regime. There's still a lot of open questions around how that reporting regime is meant to work. So I think for firms that are caught by SFTR, it's certainly worth their while to invest a lot of time in looking at the quality of their reporting. And the sooner they can address that, you're minimizing the remedial effort that's going to be required further down the line. So, the returns on that investment is much higher if you do that now. So I'd certainly countenance focusing on SFTR. Brexit being a regulatory change, whilst the changes were relatively small, I think the regulators would expect a level of due diligence to be conducted post the implementation of Brexit, and in doing so, they'd expect that would look at the overall and capture any other reporting issues. So, any issues that were there pre-Brexit will still remain, and regulators will expect the Brexit period or transition to really be a trigger for for looking at that. But like I said before, the ultimate expectation is that this is already happening. And it's really about the depth to which firms are actually testing. So light touch, scratch the surface testing is not really appropriate, nor what regulators mean by accuracy testing. So just conducting validations doesn't prove the accuracy of your data. All it does is it says it conforms with a certain shape, but it doesn't lead them to a level of confidence in the actual accuracy of the values that have been submitted. And that's what we test for. Everything, when we test, under MiFID, for example, we test data that's come from the NCAs where we can, or the arms, and we take that data, and that's already been validated by the arms or the regulators, but it's still full of holes, and we identify those holes and enable clients to prioritize and then fix those issues. And so I think there's going to be an expectation that firms carry on with that exercise, but particularly seeing as we've had a kind of triggering event like Brexit, that the expectation will be that firms will have conducted that due diligence at that point in time, which is now. So there are other areas, I think, specific areas that should be looked at. So any reporting fields that are changing due to Brexit. We've got as well, there's obviously increased complexity for firms that have a multinational footprint, covering both the UK and Europe, because they now have to deal with both versions of FIRDs and FITTers, and there are differences amongst those. So you can't just use one or the other. You have to use both the EU and the UK versions for your respective entities. And then some firms with branch activity. So if you've got a UK branch of a European firm, then that branch is going to have to report to the FCA, but the branch activity also has to be reported to Europe. But there will be a difference in the actual records that get reported, albeit subtle. Those differences will exist, and I don't think the regulators will be that accommodating if the UK version is just submitted to the EU regulator and vice versa.
Okay. And with that in mind, what are the main risks of sort of poor regulatory reporting? Why is what you do important?
Well, I think we touched on some of them. I mean, it's obviously firms are trying to meet the expectations of their regulators, and the regulators need this data to carry out their obligations around orderly markets and clean markets. And it's good for business to have good quality markets. And so that's going to remain a priority for the regulator in the UK, but also in Europe. So we're going to see this tug of war happening post-Brexit between Europe and the UK for business, and maybe that's a good thing. But that will have an impact on regulation. And so the importance of reporting is to support the aims of the regulators in carrying out their mandate. And the majority of that is around the stability of the financial sector as a whole, in terms of avoiding risks of future credit crunch issues, and then the market surveillance and market cleanliness issues. Now, for firms, they're a bit further down that process. They're trying to meet the expectations of regulators, and the aim is to do so in the most cost-effective way. So reporting has become quite a costly endeavour, with the huge increase in complexity of the reporting compared to MiFID 1 and pre-MiFID. So it's now quite a significant cost area, but it also represents a high level of risk for firms. So the costs will come in terms of just enabling the reporting in the first place, but that's really the starting point. Ensuring the reports are accurate is of key importance. Then you've got the cost of remedial work around historic reports. And that's where it really starts to get expensive, because trying to fix things is a lot harder than getting it right in the first place. And as I said, all regulators anticipate that any erroneous issues will be remediated. And so you get the costs of trying to run those programs, but then you get the costs of running the replays themselves as well, and all the interaction you have to have with the regulators. There's a lot of unseen costs that aren't immediately measurable, but they're high. And those costs are outside of the costs of getting fined, which, to be fair, the fining regime at the moment, it's the penalties are quite high, but the frequency of penalties is very low. So the main risk for firms is the cost of cleanup. And when reporting is a frequent activity for firms, and regulators use it as a kind of bellwether of the overall risk control within an organisation. So if reporting is found to be a little bit subpar, that can result in higher level of attention from regulators than perhaps firms will want, and that brings with it more interaction and costs for the firms themselves. So those are the kind of main issues that firms are trying to address.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dario. And just a final question. When we think about the regtech space that Kaizen is in, what do you foresee as being some of the key trends within regtech into 2021?
Well, yes, I think we're going to see, and we have seen already, some consolidation. So with regtech, you get smart teams being put together of experienced professionals from the industry, and they link up with technology specialists, and they come up with some great ideas. Often we see those ideas get to an early stage, and then they're getting bought out by larger firms. So I think we'll see more consolidation, and that's going to be an ongoing feature of regtech, I think. There's some big players out there, and in various roles in the industry, and they have an appetite for some of this regtech expertise. So we will see that more M&A activity, and we also see that there's ongoing funding available for regtech. So despite COVID, there's still access to capital, still VCs out there, and private equity happy to invest. And so I think that we'll see new regtech offerings emerging, but also I think that as each year goes on, the existing regtech providers, they're getting to a point in scale where they're able to invest more in their products. So those products themselves are going to improve as time moves on. So that's a real positive. I think as well, there are some themes that are emerging. Knowledge management, I think, is we're at a point now where the technology has improved, and that we will see a lot more services coming out that will enable better knowledge management within firms. And that's been a real difficulty and hidden cost for a lot of firms, because when you get staff moving either to new roles or new organizations, a lot of the specifics for the knowledge that's pertinent to the firm, it walks out the door. And so you're having to re-engineer or recreate an understanding of how regulations interact with the operations and setup of each business. So that kind of knowledge management area, I think there's a lot of new technology that will be coming to the fore. So I mean, at Kaizen, we've recently invested in Single Rulebook, which is a digitalizing the regulations, or digitizing the regulations. And I see that as a kind of first step in enabling a lot of other regtechs that sit on top of that to leverage those digital regulations for much more advanced solutions. Another theme, I think, is the increased uptake in RPA, robotic process automation, which is using basically digital workers to conduct various tasks within organizations. From a compliance point of view, I think it's really interesting because it becomes an enabler of much higher levels of monitoring or compliance monitoring than we've historically had. There will be challenges as that gets rolled out, but I think that's really interesting, and it's going to have a knock-on effect to what the expectations of the regulators will be, because regtech is an enabler, and it's enabling firms to achieve more with less, and the coverage, when you start to automate things rather than using an individual, you kind of enable the shift from a sampling world to a full testing world. And so that's going to be quite an interesting area. AI, again, there's a lot of talk about AI. That's still to really mature, but I think there's some challenges there in terms of explainability. So if we use AI in finance, we need to be able to explain how the AI's decisions have been reached. They can't just be black boxed. So I think that we'll see some more challenges from regulators. They'll start to become clearer in terms of what they expect when AI solutions are being deployed. So that I see that's going to be an interesting thing. Whether that happens in 2021 or 22, I don't know. But those are the kind of key areas that are changing now, I think. And the ongoing impact of COVID, who knows how that will slow things down. But we're all looking forward to getting back to the office and starting to work with our colleagues again. One theme that might be an issue, we haven't seen it particularly ourselves, but with COVID and everybody working remotely, when you're in a creative mode, it's much harder to have that free exchange of ideas when you're doing it remotely. And we've got some great tools to facilitate that, but it never really fully replaces people being in the same room together. So you might see a little falling off of the rate of progress of regtech whilst COVID seems to prevail across the nations. So that was my thoughts on that.
Excellent. All right. Well, Dario, thank you for talking us through all of that. There's sort of a lot to think about and a lot to look forward to into 2021. So thanks for talking us through that. So that's Dario Crispini, the founder and chief executive of Kaizen Reporting, which, as I said, won our award for Regulatory Reporting Solution of the Year for 2020. So Dario, thank you again. And I look forward to talking to you more and discussing more of these things in 2021.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luke. It's been good talking to you.